So welcome to the IDW panel this afternoon. Thanks for joining. We've got an hour to go through. I was taking notes ahead of this, and there are just so many topics. This thing should actually be going automatically behind me, but it isn't, so I may just tap on it and let it go. My name is Rob Salkowitz. I'm a writer and sayer of things about comics. I write for Forbes, I write for ICB2 and Publishers Weekly and things like that. And I have been following IDW from the business side and from the creative side, and also as a fan of their numerous wonderful works for a long time. We're here to celebrate 20 years of the imprint with Chris Ryle, to my right, editor-in-chief and publisher.
Well, now it's publisher, president, chief creative officer.
Oh, sorry.
But I started as editor-in-chief anyway. Yeah.
So to Chris's right, and we'll just call Chris the head guy. That sums up most of your titles, right?
Yeah.
We've got Shannon Wheeler, cartoonist for The New Yorker, graphic novelist, creator of Too Much Coffee Man, and writer of profane and true things about current politics.
Oh, the Bible. Don't forget I rewrote the Bible.
And he rewrote the Bible.
With a friend.
Now we got it right.
Yeah, it just needed a few connections. And then down at the end of the table is Jonathan Mabry, best-selling novelist, creator of V-Wars, among many other things. We were just talking before the panel about how incredibly productive he is, and it's shaming as a writer. So I someday aspire to a week of your productivity. So there is many things to go on for IDW, and if there's some fans in the house, I want to let you guys have plenty of opportunities to talk about this. But I just want to first just start with Chris. And so 20 years, long time. Where do we start? Do you want to do a little capsule history of the thing and what you're doing to celebrate the anniversary? Or?
We should really start at like year 5, because the first 4 or so years without me, I don't count.
Or care.
But yeah, the company started in 1999 as a sort of a design company, so doing some custom comics, custom game design, that kind of thing, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, got into publishing through an art book with Ashley Wood, and then I think the first comic that really got anybody to notice IDW, the first one that got me to notice was 30 Days of Night, which I do remember buying off the stands when that came out in 2002 or 2003. And I think they instantly got elevated at that point, because that's when Wizard Magazine was a thing that people cared about, and it could actually elevate and launch titles. I mean, I know you still care about Wizard. Some of us are, yeah. But at the time, they mentioned 30 Days in just one of their little sidebars as a comic deserving of film notice, and that instantly kickstarted this bidding war, and so Sony eventually got the rights. But I mean, when the comic launched, it did 3,500 copies, I think. You know, it was a blip as far as the comic launch goes. But then as soon as the film talk came about, then it was just like the trade paperback became this thing, and that sort of made IDW into something more than I think they even wanted to be at the start. They didn't really want to be an ongoing comic publisher, but Ted Adams, who was the CEO and one of the founders, was friends with Steve Niles, the writer of 30 Days a Night, and Niles couldn't get this thing sold as a film, he couldn't get it sold as a comic elsewhere, and so he said, all right, I'll do this as a favor to you, but you know, we're not a comic publisher, but we'll do this thing as a favor. And then I think once that worked, they were like, maybe we should make more of a go of this. And then it sort of just all steamrolled forward from there.
And these days, in addition to IDW, which publishes under its own imprint, Transformers, Star Trek, lots of really cool licensed books and things, and original properties, there are a plethora of other imprints under the IDW umbrella, such as...
I didn't know if we wanted Shan to answer that one.
Yeah,
Top Shelf was an addition a few years ago that really, I think, gave us the thing that the company had been lacking. We've done good with the creator-owned books, and you know, largely with a horror bent, especially at the start. and then added things along the way like art books, the strip book collections, the Library of American Comics that Dean Mulaney was running, and then Craig Yo's line. But we never really been able to do anything good with like the idiosyncratic stories, the personal stories, and all the things that Top Shelf does really well. And so I think all of us, just as fans of the company for so long before, were ecstatic when that, when Top Shelf became a part of the family.
And
I don't know how you felt about it, but
I was terrified. I thought, this is the end, it's gonna suck. That's like, am I gonna get a paycheck anymore, ever?
I think that was the thing. We were very wary of like, we don't want to mess with Chris's business. Like the business that they built there was going great. And so I just want them to have a good place to be able to do these books and do more of them and keep it all going. And so hopefully it was that. It was just like, here's a new home, but it's not gonna make you change the way you're doing things.
Nah, I'm still a jerk.
So Shannon, you came into the IDW family through the Top Shelf door there?
Yeah, it's like the 23andMe when you find out that you have a new father.
And so what new projects have you got on tap through there?
What am I doing next? Oh, yeah. It's a collection of, originally I was going to do gag strips, a book of gag strips, rejections from the New Yorker, or a few that ran. And to sell a cartoon to the New Yorker, you do 100 strips that get rejected, and some of them are okay, but usually you have enough to put together a book. So I was doing that when Trump got elected, and then I did the Trump book because I was so disturbed and upset, and I needed a way to vent. And so it's basically now going back and doing the gag book that I procrastinated on when I did the Trump book. So, why did we trust him? So the title kind of still fits with the Trump book, but and it's a island with 3 people, and in the background, obviously the iconic tree had been cut down and turned into a chair instead of a raft, as it should have been, which is, again, it's a metaphor for what we've done to ourselves, but at least one person has a chair now. The Bible we did, that was with Top Shelf. And yeah, I've got like some other game ideas I still have that I really want to do eventually. I just have to do it. And
one of the cooler projects that you've done in the last couple of years is V-Wars, of course, which you've taken from book to graphic novel and comics. And
They already unplugged his mic.
Yep, he unplugged his mic.
No, there's no plug on the mic.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll share.
you can share with Shannon. But anyway, I remember when it came out, there was a big collection. It's a sort of a shared world story, and maybe Jonathan, you can tell us a little about what's going on and what is ahead for the property.
Well, really, in brief, what the story is about is melting polar ice releases diseases from permafrost, and they're ancient diseases, and they trigger dormant genes, and in this case, a gene that codes for vampirism. Turns out vampirism is a genetic disorder, not supernatural. And people turn into different types of vampires based on where their ethnic lines come from, because in world folklore there are hundreds of different types of vampires. Every culture has their own beliefs, and they're all different. So, we played with that. I concocted it as a shared world. I love the idea of shared world stuff, and I wrote the framing story, and invited a couple of friends of mine in to do individual stories. It's kind of like field reports, because this is breaking out all over the world, this plague. And we had a lot of fun. We did 4 of the prose anthologies, each one with a new framing story, and some returning writers, some first-timers. And then they asked me to do a V-Wars comic, so I did 12 issues of that with art by Adam Robinson, covers by Ryan Brown, who did some amazing covers, and variant covers by Kevin Eastman. And so that was kind of cool for me, because I'm pretty sure I bought a wing of Kevin's house with all the toys, Ninja Turtle toys I bought for my son. So it's like, when he gave me that the original art for one of the covers, I figured that was just payback.
Now you're even.
Yeah, but then IDW Media decided they wanted to try to shop it as a TV show, And this was right around the time they were getting Winona Earp on TV, which turned out to be a great cult hit, fun show. So they shopped V-Wars around, and it landed on Netflix. Ian Somerhalder's the star of it, and we have a pretty great multi-ethnic cast. Probably the best looking cast I've ever seen in a show.
He's very pretty, that Ian.
Yeah, it's funny. Here's the story. My wife had never actually seen him in anything, right? So I showed her a picture of Ian Somerhalder, and she's like, "Oh, he can act." She didn't remember him from Lost.
Yeah.
She remembered the guy with the Australian guy with the long hair.
Sure.
So I got to go up on the set and go to meet all the actors, and I had a blast. It was my first TV show. Got a couple other things in the works also, but that was my first TV show.
This guy over here.
Yeah, well, I expect to have more than one TV show. It's a bit surreal watching the dailies every day. They send me a link and I'll sit there and watch the dailies and not write, which is something I should have been doing. But we just did a new V-Wars comic, and it's a standalone. It's called V-Wars God of Death, with great art by Alex Milne, and looking forward to that coming out, because it's been a few years since we did the original story, and there's been story happening between that. So we pick up after when you can tell there's a lot happening, and I'm very excited about it. There's also a V-Wars board game that IDW put out. I have played about, 80 times. I have won it 0 times. I have never once come close to winning that fucking game. But people love the game, so yay. But I get like, not only do I lose like badly. Like I had an aneurysm while playing badly, that level of badly. But right now, we're in post-production for V-Wars. I'm told that fall sounds likely, but I don't know if that's true or not. Are you going to say winter of next year?
I'm not going to. It's funny, we never know, because Netflix holds everything so close to the vest that, it'll just show up, or we'll know right before. But yeah, right now, I think this time next year, we should have 3 shows on the air with V-Wars, October Faction, which is another Steve Niles property, and Lock and Key. But we don't know the timing of anything in between, but it should all be happening.
Yeah, I've got a bottle of Dom Perignon in my fridge that I want to drink when it launches. I don't want it to be like an artifact of an ancient culture by the time I get to it. So. Anyways, that's V-Wars.
Very cool. So one of the challenging things about moderating an IDW panel is that we're going to skip between sort of political humor and shared world vampire stories to now something that has one of the really exciting announcements that you guys had over last summer, which was surprising in a couple of ways, is, so first of all, as you may know, IDW does the Star Wars kids comics. Star Wars is owned by Disney, which, as you know, has its own comic publisher as part of the family. Nevertheless, IDW is doing that. And that was surprising enough. But then the next announcement is that IDW is doing Marvel kids comics instead of Marvel itself doing it. How did that come about, and how is that going? How is that shaping up?
I think in the same way that the Star Wars comics came about, because it's not like when we were kids, when we read a comic and it was just a comic that everybody would enjoy. Now everything is very sort of segmented for different audiences, and so Marvel's very good at doing comics that reach their core audience, but in their mind, if they keep doing that, but then we do comics that reach the younger audience the same way that we reach them with, My Little Pony, some of the Ninja Turtles, animated comics, all the things that we've done to reach sort of that younger or developing or new comic reading audience, it just felt like a win for everybody. Like, we can do that thing to develop the next generation of fans who will then go on to buy Marvel Comics for the next 40, 50 years. So, it allowed them to keep doing what they do and allowed us to apply a lot of things that we learned and that we like to do, which is, reaching a younger audience and telling those kind of stories that appeal to kids. So when parents go to the store to buy their comics, there's now a good number of things that they can give to their kids that hopefully, get them both hooked in the hobby in the same way.
Yeah, this was a phenomenon that I started noticing, 5 or 6 years ago, that we would go into our comic store to pick up our comics. We'd go in on Saturday to get it, and more and more the comic store there was lots of little girls, like 8 to 10-year-old girls, coming in and picking up My Little Pony, and also Lumberjanes and Adventure Time and stuff like that.
25-year-old boys elbowing them aside to pick up the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
great
so
crossover audience.
it changed the demographics, and there's a lot of hand-wringing, about like the future of the industry and how is retail going to work, and it's like everybody knows the answer is to expand the audience a little bit and get new people interested in these properties, and it's really cool that you're doing that. Do you have like your own phase strategy for how do you move kids from My Little Pony? Is there like the next thing that they would read when they're like 12 or 13, and then some, is there a life cycle plan to turn these people into addicts for life like us?
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the real reason behind the Top Shelf partnership, was we figured once they get out of My Little Pony, now we have From Hell waiting. So
welcome to the real world, kid.
But no, I mean, I don't think it's ever as calculated as that. It's if you like My Little Pony, then maybe you like Ninja Turtles, and if you like the younger Ninja Turtles, there's other Ninja Turtle books that can sort of carry you along beyond that. And you like people to sort of find their own way. You just offer a wide variety of stuff that hopefully hits them at each point in their comic reading development.
Well, you just added one of the great all-time, all-ages titles in comics history to your lineup. That would be Usagi Yojimbo.
And one of the great all-time creators, too. Like, there's very few properties where the creation and the creator are both as equally beloved and lovable as Usagi and Stan Sakai. It's like Gru and Sergio, where you just can't remove one without the other, because they're both, like, their property is as great and fun and far-reaching as the creator themselves. And so having somebody like Stan in the family now and being able to relaunch Usagi, and we're going to relaunch Usagi in color for the first time, it just makes me happy on so many levels. As a fan of that book for decades, as a fan of Stan, as somebody who just wants to be around Stan, like, it's everything that we want a comic and a property to be.
How did Dark Horse lose Stan? I mean, he's a treasure. Like, if I were publishing, there would be red carpets wherever he walked would have flower petals and small children throwing them. And, how did you have negatives of something horrible that he did, and now you're like, hey, you better come to us? Or
I mean, nobody's listening or recording this, right? Like, I mean, all I can say is I'm happy that whatever path led Stan here.
Stick or carrot? That's all I want to know. Stick or carrot?
I mean, carrot from us, stick from us.
Extortion is such an ugly word.
I think with anything, and I mean, I'm no one to talk, because I was at IDW for about 14 years, and then I left for most of last year before returning, and so Stan was at Dark Horse for decades, and I think sometimes you reach a point where just sometimes the paths that you've been on start to go like this in whatever ways, and so again, I'm just happy that whatever those decisions or look how I'm trying to be very careful. I'm happy that led Stan to us.
I mean, is this something that you're looking to do? Because there's lots of cool creator-owned properties out there, which of course is up to the creator where they want to land that. And in the past, you guys haven't really been like destination one as a landing point for creator-owned stuff. Is that?
I mean, if Stan was the Pied Piper that Sergio and Mike Mignola and Eric Powell and all these other people wanted to follow, like, I'm not going to dissuade them.
Good luck with Colin. But, so one more interesting thing. So we're talking about serving well the kids market and stuff like that. You also serve the old fart market very well. Speaking for myself, as somebody that has way more artist editions than the foundations of my house will allow right now. Anybody here have one or two or an embarrassing number of these?
17? Yeah.
All of them?
If you guys don't know the artist editions, by the way, they're these gigantic oversized books, hardcover books that are scans of the original art with the notes often from the artist on there.
And the tears and blood stains.
Yeah, tears and blood, grocery list. I find it particularly fascinating as a writer of comics to look at this and see the interpretation, to see sometimes the little sketches and what's erased out, or all the different little human touches that created these landmark comics. You get to crawl inside the head of the artist quite a bit, and they make fascinating, coffee table books, but they also make fascinating studies. If you are in the, want to write comics or want to draw comics, each one is like a class, a master class in how it's done.
And they're produced at the size that the art was drawn, so the books will be 17 by 24 or whatever size the comics were drawn at originally. It's like the closest you get to owning the original art. Yeah, most people love them. You know who doesn't? Colorists.
There should be a book of just colors, no lines, just color.
We actually did that in some old Marvel books that we did. We ran the separate color plates, so you can see them in cyan and all the different...
Yeah, these are not for the faint of heart or the light of wallet or people with bad backs, because they are tombstone sized, and they're printed on heavy stock by Scott Jr. does these, and just he kind of pioneered an industry, because there's now other people in the market.
Rip-offs, we can say, knockoffs, cheap substitutes,
cheap imitations. Yes.
Look at this panel more and more.
Yeah. So.
But I think that's one thing I love about IDW and Scott in particular, or people like Craig Yo and Dean, is that the preservation of this old comics is so important, and it hasn't always been done in a great way. And so a lot of times I get why some of the bigger publishers wouldn't want to do, especially the strip books, which takes so much work and reconstruction and scanning and cleanup, and even sometimes going to libraries and places to find these old strips and scanning them. And so I get that it can be difficult and costly and time consuming to make them, but man, preserving that old stuff and getting those books out there in archival formats and just sort of paying back the founders of this industry, the people that built the foundation that we're all now profiting from and adding to, that just always feels like a mission statement as much as anything else.
And when I've gone to, I do a lot of school visits around the country, and sometimes I will actually drag one of those books along with me.
In case the kids eat out of line? Or?
No. Well, there's that, but sometimes I like if I'm going in to talk about my books to an auditorium full of kids, that's great, but sometimes there are like cutout classes where it's a special group who are really interested in writing. And if it's a comic book group, showing them that, because a lot of the kids today think the comics are all done online. They don't realize that there's actual physical art involved in it, and especially in the pre-internet days. And it's fun to show them the comic itself, and then the drawing, and sometimes I can get the script and show them the different stages of it, and it's really eye-opening for them, and sometimes gets them to want to do comics, to get really focused on the process of doing comics. I did this down at Ringling College in Florida, Ringling College of the Arts, because they have a comic book track there, and they were absolutely fascinated. I had the Bernie Wrightson book with me, and they were just like, some of them had never heard of Bernie Wrightson, for God's sake.
And you realize if guys look good at this size, some of them, Kirby and Wrights and all of them, look so much better at that size. And like the Sergio book, where you could take in every detail of Drew that like my eyes can no longer quite register in comic form.
Supposedly Stan gave Sergio his comic, the original art, to proof and look at and all that. And Sergio had it and read it and gave it back to Stan and said, "Oh, this is great. I really like, here, I had a couple suggestions." Evidently, after it got printed, people were coming up to Stan saying, "I really like how you put Gru in the background in this one scene." Sergio had drawn in.
Like the .005. Yeah.
This is a way more profane version of that, but there was, we were doing a book called Shaun of the Dead. It was the first comic I ever wrote myself, just an adaptation. And the artist, Zach Howard, needed some inking help. And the inker he brought in, a friend of his, is now one of DC's top artists. And he drew so many penises in the background of his book, and I didn't spot any of them at the time until after it was printed when Zach goes, "Dude, look at this." And they're just like there's a lot of zombies in that book, and there's more penises just in the book. So
I'll have to wait for the artist edition to get it out. But those are gorgeous books. I just did a panel earlier today about comic art in museums, and you could walk around and see these things behind glass, or you can, pay $20,000 to own an original Jack Kirby page, or you can pick up this book, and it's like you could practically smell the cigar smoke on the pages. They're really
they're especially fun in the Fantastic Four books, where Stan's dialoguing, but Kirby's notes of what the dialogue should be are written in the margins and everything. Sometimes heated, often not.
Yes. So I noticed also when I was doing my homework for this, speaking of the Dean Mulaney stuff, it might be of interest to the folks in this room, that you've got a new Alex Toth thing on the way, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dean would do every possible Toth project if possible, and I support that fully. I'm still hoping at some point we can work out a way to do Toth's Hot Wheels comics, but we've tried, but yeah, so far no luck yet. But
Yeah, because they're DC put them out. There's no way they would reacquire the license for that just to put out a reprint edition. Yeah, that's an interesting.
There needs to be an art system just for Toth lettering. It's just so beautiful to look at.
It's so you're getting the idea. We haven't even talked about like the licensed books or or a Black Crown or any of that other stuff, which we can get to if you want. But it's one of the things that's always interested me is how eclectic you guys are. And so IDW is last year was the number 4 publisher by dollar in market share according to Diamond, after Marvel, DC, and Image, and then Dark Horse and Boom and these other guys down the line. And I think with every one of those other publishers, you have a sense of you know what a DC comic is, you know what an Image comic is, basically, Dark Horse. What is an IDW comic like? What is the identity of this press? Given that you're doing all of these different things and doing them all really well, usually it's like what's
Penises in the background.
Make that the tagline. That's
It's funny. We've actually been talking about that lately. Like what not penises, but I mean, all conversations eventually get there. But we were trying to figure out, how do we say who we are in a sentence now? Because it used to always be. Like we would always say, we're the HBO of comics. We don't do superheroes, but when you outgrow that nonsense, we have all kinds of other things for you. But then when you do things like Transformers and Ninja Turtles and other things that are essentially superhero books, it suddenly loses some impact. Plus, everybody calls themselves the HBO of something at this point. So, and I don't think that even carries the weight it used to. It's like we always tried to offer the alternative to the big publishers. So we've largely stayed away from superhero books, but by doing art books and strip books and archival things and kids comics and top shelf properties, licensed stuff, creator-owned books like Lock and Key, novel adaptations, it does sort of become a bigger conversation to try to figure out what you are. But then there's a part of me that goes, well, Random House doesn't try to say what Random House is. Random House does this, and then their imprint, that's their, romance imprint or their horror imprint or action imprint, do all these things. So, I don't know, is it...
Random is right there in the name, so...
Yeah, but I mean, is it important to sort of, to know what that is? And maybe it is. Like, I certainly think it helps retailers tell people what an IDW book is or what to expect from it. But that is the thing, as we've branched out more and more and had more and more imprints, we've struggled with trying to figure out, how do we encapsulate that in some pithy little phrase that works into an ad or something. I don't think we've settled on that new identity just yet.
Well, this is, I mean, you're since you're new in the leadership relatively in that probably on your plate, so something to think about. So I've got a whole list of stuff here and we can go through it, but the better thing is if you guys have some questions, here we have a smorgasbord of creative people. Yes, sir.
With the properties that are going to the screen, big screen, small screen, are there going to be any tie-ins, reissues, or maybe new things? They've got the new V-Wars comic coming out.
Yeah, did you have the show in mind at all in doing this?
Well, kind of. There's no official connection to the V-Wars Netflix show, but the characters may have edged a little more into looking like some of the actors in there, just a little, unofficially. And there was a character that we killed off in the books that is a significant character in the show, so I found a way to bring him back, which actually I had planned to do even before they sold to Netflix. I set it up in the last of the Crows books, but we didn't do a fifth, so it kind of just stayed there. So this is a way of bringing that character back because he is a major character in the show. So a little bit of a nod there.
The nice thing is with something like Lock and Key, where it's such a finite thing, I don't know that we feel the pressure to try to tie into the show, which is gonna, it'll take different turns and sort of, like all TV shows do, diverge from the source material. Because there's a part of me that I'm always driven crazy by, like, the fact that the Defenders is now a show on Netflix, so suddenly Elektra is front and center in the comics and fighting alien races and whatnot. Like, I don't know that the people that read the show or watch the shows pick up the comics and want to see that exactly. It's hard to know, but I think with Lock and Key, like, we would never ask or push Joe and Gabriel to do something to sort of adhere to this when this is the thing for them. And so we're talking about new Lock and Key. I don't want to announce just yet, but we're talking about some new Lock and Key projects. But, you know, we would keep it firmly rooted in the world that they've established, not necessarily try to pivot to what the TV show's doing.
Yeah, now, in terms of reissue, though, with viewers, all the comics are being gathered into an omnibus edition. So that, you know, that's going to be the reissue there. And there's talk about taking my framing story from the first 4 volumes and putting it into one prose volume. And I'm not sure where that stands, but I know we agreed to it, but I'm not sure where we are with it.
And no photo covers like the novels. That's always
Netflix hasn't approved that yet.
Yeah.
So, but that's probably going to happen at some point. If the show is, you know, a hit and there's a demand for comics that tie into the show, I'm sure that's a conversation we can have if the demand is there. You know?
Yeah, and like with Winona Earp, that the comics were very much positioned to tie in and fit within that universe because a lot of the fans of the show weren't really big comic buyers. They were just supporters of Winona. And so if they picked up the comic, we wanted that to match. But, you know, it sort of depends case by case. But with like Lock and Key and viewers, I don't think there will be anything that is trying too deliberately to tie it directly into the TV.
Now, one of the coolest media projects that you did was almost 10 years ago now, was when the Star Trek franchise rebooted with J.J. Abrams, and IDW had a 4-issue miniseries that focused on the villain in that first Star Trek reboot, Nemo or Nero, yeah. And sort of filled in some backstory so you could watch the movie and not know any of this stuff and it would be perfectly satisfying. But if you read the comics and you watched the movie, you got a fuller version of the story. And I was a little disappointed that more franchises don't do that to sort of fill in, because comics are an easy, high story payload way to fill in some of that stuff and deliver, you know, more to the fans and everything.
You know what it requires is a strong, not only a strong voice that's working on that property on the film or TV side, but also somebody with the clout to get the studio to sort of get over their reticence to do anything that might spoil something in their minds. But like with that one, it was a great convergence of a creator working on the movies that was also a big comic fan and saw the value in doing side stories or fleshing out Nero's background in comics in Bob Orsi. So he sort of pushed this through force of will because he was the guy running the movie. So he was given a lot of freedom to establish the story and sort of bring it into the comic world. Whereas if it was just a straight licensed property without Bob's involvement, I don't know that we ever would have been able to get away with that. And that remains one of the best licensed things that we've done because it had that it sort of became a necessity for a lot of the movie fans and also reached people digitally in ways that most comics don't, because a lot of the movie fans who weren't comic buyers, you know, checked it out to get more of a full story. And so we always try to cite that to other studios when they get reticent to let you show anything. Like, no, look, it can really work if you just relax a little bit. And
this is like Transformers in particular would have benefited from that, just because anything that adds more coherence to that universe on screen would be welcome. But
okay, I just...
Yep, fair enough. Enough said.
Transformers was funny though. On one Transformer story, when we first got the license, it was hard to get because nobody knew who IDW was in mid-2005 when we were pitching. And then when we announced it, IDW fans like revolted for a while. Because IDW at that point was mostly horror comics. It was all the Steve Niles fans that went from 30 Days of Night to his other titles that he did. And so they thought of us as like this little dark corner in comics. And we were doing these horror, zombie, and
CSI?
CSI was kind of its own thing because that was only bought by fans of the show. I don't think comic fans really paid attention to it. But like the people that were otherwise buying every IDW title saw Transformers get announced, they're like, what the fuck? Like, we thought we knew you, man. Like, you can't just change like this on us. And so That right then is sort of where our identity crisis first started. It split us from a horror fan, like you could tell with the fan base right away. Like you could tell the Transformer fans and like the Niles fans, and from there it just sort of more and more fractured into very specific audiences.
Well, I mean, it's the fact that some of these have become these big on-screen franchises and stuff like that. It just seems like a missed opportunity that you've got great storytellers that can deliver this stuff, you know, like for a rounding error in their production budget.
Well, you know, one of the odd things about Hollywood and its view of comics, I mean, Hollywood's making a lot of money off of movies based on comics, but I've never gotten the impression that they deeply respect the actual comics.
Yeah.
I've gotten the impression that they don't.
Yes, rather the opposite.
There you go. And which is crazy, because if it wasn't for the comics, those movies wouldn't exist. The fan bases wouldn't be as huge and as loyal as they are. It just seems to me that it's a no-brainer that they should want to work with the comic companies to do the tie-ins much more easily, with less stress and less red tape. And it's, from what I've been seeing, it's just the opposite.
I think even more than tie-ins, what would be great and what would elevate the whole thing for everybody is when there's a panel at a con or a signing, and Chris Hemsworth's sitting there signing stuff, he should be sitting next to Jason Aaron or Walt Simonson, and sort of elevate the creators and the actors and sort of like get them conflated. Thank you. It's been a long day with a lot of talking. In the fans' minds, you know, and so the people that go there to see Hemsworth might be more drawn to the comic because the guy that wrote the comic is sitting there passionately talking about the comic and everything. And so I think it's that weird separation, like the steerage class versus the first class or what have you, that we need to get past and realize that the creators are the ones who should really be benefiting from that attention as much as the actors.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of my buddy Mike Mignola. You don't see him in a lot of photos with the cast of Hellboy, unless he runs into one of them at a con and takes a selfie.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
I know it's a Dark Horse comic book.
other
For
questions?
now, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I've heard that there's a new Roy Crinkle book coming out, is that true?
Not scheduled yet, but talked about.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And the second volume of the artist edition of Don Rosa's?
Still-
For a while? no?
yes, it's still pending. Disney
I had
books.
it on pre-order, I think, for
Yeah.
5 months now, so.
The Disney books, sometimes there's some schedule fluctuations that we're working on, but yeah, certainly hoping so.
I've had volume 2 of the Steranko book on order for like 5 years.
What kills me about that is like, the book is done, man. The book's been done for 60 years. Like, we should be able to put that book out. But Jim works methodically. Yes.
Right, so I'm a native San Diegan, just like IDW. And as you know, there's one weekend of the year that we are the central nexus of pop culture. Somebody might have written a book about it. And then the other 51 weeks, we've kind of got this inferiority complex going on. And my ultimate goal, I run the comic shop Villainous Lair. My ultimate plan was to try and change that. That didn't work. You guys, I love and supported everything you're doing with Comic Art Gallery. I'm currently pinning my hopes. Everything I've heard this weekend from the museum that's going in has been like super encouraging.
Yeah.
Like, I'm super hopeful. So I was hoping to hear if you guys have any plans to work with them.
Yeah, I've actually been talking to them from the start on the museum, and through some ideas and things that I'd like to see there. And yeah, I'd like to keep that dialogue going. By the way, I should mention I lived in Kensington, and Villainous Lair was an amazing store. But yeah, I think that museum has a lot of potential just to really draw people in that, again, think of comics one way. They think of them as the thing they saw on screen or a video game, and then if they can get in there and see the process of making comics, and even hopefully there'll be some interactive elements for kids to play around with, even making their own, or just a lot of that kind of stuff, I think is going to put even more focus on just the creation of comics more than the end result that they're seeing on screen.
And IDW is a native child of San Diego,
Yeah.
but you also have a footprint in the Northwest with PDX, the publishers of the great Full Bleed anthology, of which I'm proud to be a contributor. Shannon, did you contribute to Full Bleed? Are you in there?
Yeah, I can't remember what of my stuff. I think, yeah, 1 or 2 stories in there, like the killing a chicken, or there's some horrible. I always do embarrassing stories, but yeah, I think so.
And I'm writing an essay for them now.
Yeah, and I got a long Stephen King interview in the first book too. So yeah, that's some good sort of deep dive content.
Just out of curiosity, how many people in this room have either heard of or read or handled a copy of this thing?
Full
Yeah,
bleed,
Full Bleed, yeah.
It's hardcover quarterly, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very eclectic publication, and some of it is comic stuff like Shannon's doing, some of it is journalism and reportage or essays and stuff like that I'm doing. I'm hoping to have something lined up for a next upcoming issue on Comic Cons in Africa.
Ted Adams was in Cuba, and he wrote about sort of the scene and the publishing world down in Cuba and all of that. And so yeah, it takes a lot of deep dives and almost a global perspective about comics and publishing.
Yeah, and also personal stuff too. The essay I'm writing is about how the character Black Panther, who I encountered in comics in the 60s when I was a kid, is what split me off from the ideology that I was raised into. My father was head of the local chapter of the KKK. I learned about diversity and realities of racism because of a comic book character. So I'm writing about that. So there, a lot of people make the mistake of saying, unfortunately I hear this in academia a lot, where they say, comics are just for kids, or comics are not an important thing, they're not a good educational tool, they don't change lives. They do all of that. They do absolutely all of that. So Full Bleed is great for really unpacking what comics are, what they mean, why we write them, what they're about, who they're about. It's a really incredible quarterly.
Dirk asked me to write a piece for him singing the praises of the Eisner Awards, because whenever you come out of that show, everybody's like, oh, that show is so long, it's so this and so that, and I'm like, I come out of that show every year so invigorated. Yeah. I don't care if it's 3 hours, it needs to be 7 hours long. Like it's never long enough, awkward enough. It's everything I want it to be, and I come out of there just feeling so good about comics and the width and breadth of material and the creators and hearing from the veterans, and just like, I love everything about that show, and I want to get people past the idea that show is boring, because it's not. It's lovely,
no,
fantastic, and celebratory.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
My wife in the third row there has an 18-year Eisner Award volunteer helping Jackie, who deserves all the props that she can possibly get. So it's a cool thing to say. Other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
So I guess I should just start off with this. Like, I'm an aspiring comic book artist. What could IDW do to open up the comic book industry to people who are brand new to it, and also brand new to comics? I really like how you guys were talking about opening it to new demographics, and God, it breaks my heart so much whenever I talk to anybody and they're like, oh, I've never even read a comic book, and they don't know everything that goes into it. In fact, I really like what you did, Jonathan, with the whole artist edition of things, and showing it to kids how comics are made, because they all think it's digital. I kind of did the same thing in my 10th grade art class, and kind of showed everyone the whole process of comics, and it surprisingly got everyone super into it. And they all wanted to start making comics all of a sudden. I don't necessarily have my foot in the door, but I would definitely love to. How would I do that so I can try to open doors for other people?
I have a couple parts to that answer, but I'd like to hear from Shannon first as an artist. What did you go through coming up and getting noticed, and how did you go about sort of breaking in?
I shot a comic with a gun.
Did you like it, or
As one does.
We were self-publishing. I had a group of friends, and it was about 4 of us in a little publishing company, and we needed a gimmick, and this was in the days of Wizard, and our second issue didn't sell as well as the first, so third issue we needed a gimmick, and we thought, well, let's shoot it with a gun. So we took, I don't know what it was, 5,000-6,000 comics and out to a field and shot them. We put them in stacks, and anyway, that was it. The idea there is like, how do you stand out from the crowd? And then all the stories too would relate to the bullet hole as it went through, so that there's like a window breaking and too much confidence getting shot and the tire blows out. So the whole is integral to the story. And then we got ripped off by the Protectors, who was part of some other thing. So you'll get ripped off, but bunch of a-holes. We were kids. But yeah, it's just doing the work and just being stupid and just continually doing the work is what I would say.
Yeah, I saw we just got the 5-minute sign. So well, quickly, I would say, I mean, if you want to make comics, like especially early on, just find an artist if you're a writer, find a writer if you're an artist, and just make them and have fun with them, and don't worry about the breaking in yet. Like sort of get all the bad comics out of you and just keep getting better and better at the skill. But as far as what IDW, what I want to do for us personally is, I've been kicking this around with people in the office. I want to launch some kind of an academy of some sort where we need to figure out, how we fund this whole thing and all that. But I want it to be a place where people that have never been published can at least get stuff workshopped to a point and see if it can become publishable. And if not, then it goes back to you and you do your thing with it and take it wherever you want. But I feel like it's a very important thing to try to pay back. Like I've had a lot of opportunities as a result of being allowed into comics, and I want to be able to find ways to allow other people that same opportunity, and it won't work for everybody, and there will be stuff that we can't publish for different reasons. But if there's a way to help develop people and just encourage people, and then maybe they go out into the world and help further try and encourage, then I think that's a thing that we sort of owe the community.
So on that point, so both you and your predecessor, Ted Adams, who's a good friend of mine as well, have this public ethic about what you want to do with comics. And it's not just about the making of the money and everything. You guys are very generous in all kinds of ways. I'm a member of a nonprofit in Seattle that uses comics to promote literacy in schools and libraries. And you guys gave us a massive in-kind pile of books to distribute to the schools up there. And I know that's just like one part of the stuff that you're doing. My question is that, as the business guy, I look at, if you've been reading anything about IDW in the news right now, on the business side, in terms of the corporate structure, IDW Publishing is a division of a larger group that is not a fountain of good news right now. You guys gonna be okay?
Yeah, it's funny because all of these headlines, it always sounds defensive to explain anything away, but the headlines all refer to either losses on the entertainment division that were expected. A lot of times when you set yourself up as your own studio, you're funding stuff up front. You make that money here or here when the show is on and the show sells to different markets. And so you're going to take a deficit at the start, but then when that stuff gets broadcast, like once you become public and your earnings are put out into the world, they are misinterpreted every possible which way. And so if people see a loss here because it says IDW, in everybody's minds IDW means publishing, but that's entertainment and not publishing, and we're
IDW Media Holdings.
Yeah, so it doesn't do anything to affect us other than makes my life miserable with all of these things to sort of explain away or talk about and discuss.
Yeah, and having had these conversations with Ted, I'm aware of what the company structure is and stuff like that. And like as you say, it's like the way this stuff goes through the books is very confusing sometimes. But you guys are, you're a publishing arm of it, so you're very ambitious with all the stuff that you're doing. And I just hope that there's enough that this is not a drag on.
Yeah, no, and it's not, and I appreciate you asking. We've always been smart about things the way we approach the business. Like having an MBA run the company instead of a fan is always a smart way to sort of make sure that things are gonna
Hey, I take offense to that.
Hey, I have an MBA and I'm a fan, so,
That's a perfect combination, yeah.
Also, MBAs have done a lot of damage in this world.
Yeah.
But anyway, on that happy note, you guys have been terrific. I hope you've enjoyed the day 2 of this fantastic Comic Fest. Thank you guys. Who's going to be around tomorrow?
I'll be around tomorrow.
Yep.
No, I'll be finishing my novel tomorrow.
Jonathan's out. I'll be around tomorrow as well. I've been doing a panel with Mark Schultz at noon on his artwork. The subject, by the way, of an absolutely monumental and beautiful artist edition. So thank you guys all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.